We've got a super exciting conversation planned because we are going to talk about our upcoming Nauticos search for Amelia Earhart's Lockheed Electra aircraft, which is missing since 1937 out near Howland Island, out in the middle of the South Pacific Ocean. And today we're going to talk to a couple of our incredible experts who have years of experience locating mysterious things under the water. So our two guests here today, as folks continue to join us, thank you so much for hopping on our live video here. Our two guests today, of course, Jeff Morris, Nauticos Project Manager, and Tom Detweiler, who was Operations Manager of Titanic and is also Operations Manager of Nauticos. So let's kick things off with you, Jeff. Any opening statements about our big announcement as we tell everyone that we're heading back out to find the plane?
It's an interesting point in time because we've been working on this project for 30 years and we haven't publicized much about our work. We've really never gone to the press with anything we've done. And in the last couple of years, we've done a bunch of work, a bunch of research that has led us to a point now where we have something that we would consider as important to say, which is that we now know where she was at 8 a.m. On the day she disappeared, 43 minutes before her last transmission. So this is the beginning of getting to tell the story of the last 30 years and the research we've done, the 3 expeditions we've done, and how this is culminating in what we believe is going to put us finding her aircraft in a short period of time until we're back on the station.
Yeah, it's exciting stuff. And Tom, what about you? How does it feel to be involved in Nauticos years later as we head back out and start things up again in 2025?
Well, I did start this venture with Nauticos when we got introduced to Elgin Long, and he got us inspired and excited. And we actually had to build our own equipment at that time and get out there and start searching. Equipment has improved greatly over the years, and so it's going to be exciting to get out there with some of the new technologies. It's, as Jeff said, we've really narrowed the area down. When we started this back in 2002, the area we had to search was just unfathomable. It's one of the largest search areas that's ever been conducted, and we've covered a great deal of ocean bottom out there. And we really do, I believe, have it narrowed down now to where it's a very doable sort of project, and looking for great results from this.
Yeah, it's exciting stuff. And as I've gotten to know the team, I've been keyed into the details of all the data that's been collected through the years of recreating Amelia Earhart and Fred Noonan's radio system from the Lockheed Electra to then test it over the water. And that's how we've identified this area where we want to go back out and search. And as we've all been chatting about as a team in our weekly meetings, we're on a roll here. We've got some momentum going after our announcement. We're talking about how to really get the word out about Nauticos and what separates us from the other searches for Amelia, because a common response that a lot of us hear when we say that we're involved in this search is, oh, I heard about that. No, you didn't. So, Jeff, what sets us apart, and why is Nauticos considered the real deal, in your opinion, and from people you trust as well?
Well, the genesis of Nauticos was as basically a contractor supporting lab activity, supporting various different government programs and things like that. And the techniques that were used to do that, there was a lot of data analysis done, a lot of navigation data processing that was done. And that's what the genesis of the project was, where it was actually WGBH Nova who came to us in 1995 with the very beginning of the project. And they said, hey, we've got this author, Elgin Long, and he wants to go search for Amelia Earhart. And would you guys be willing to look at the information he has and what he's proposing? And that began our own look at the project, our own vetting of his research, which I was brought in about that time into the team in 1996 is when I met Tom and started working a little bit on it. But we started with the fundamental research of where what really happened here? Is there any validity to any of the other theories that are out there that she was captured by the Japanese, that she ended up in some other location? And I'm an underwater archaeologist by training, of a master's degree in that, so I spent a lot of time in the National Archives. We did that, and I double checked, and I spent months in the archives looking for any document anywhere that pointed somewhere else. And that just, there was nothing there, literally nothing there. The only thing there was the official record as we knew. So at that point, we're studying the official records and the radio logs and everything that's in the Navy reports, the Coast Guard reports, etc. And we're like, we only have so much here. It can only get us so far, and it basically takes us to the point where Elgin, which is roughly a 7,000 square nautical miles search area on the island. And in those conversations, we're looking at it, we're going, you know what? There's a tremendous amount of radio data here. Anybody out there that can help us? And we had a lot of connections to a lot of different think tanks and people who doing detailed analysis of systems and engineering and data. And we reached out through that network, and that connected us to Rockwell College. In the beginning, our radio analysis stuff was based on theoretical modeling because we didn't have functional radios. We could take the spec sheets, we could take the engineering drawings, and we could build models in software. And we from that predict certain elements of it. But it's not the same of having the system.
Yeah.
And then now we've taken that to the next level where we actually have the systems, we rebuilt them, and then you take them to sea and test them. And we are standing on top a mountain of scientific information to take us forward.
Yeah, it's wild how precise this all is, and seeing that information adds so much confidence. And that's why our logo and our slogan with Nauticos is no myth, all math. We're focused on that data, and there's so much myth around Amelia. That's really what sets this team apart. And that's why, when I think about you, Tom, and your past connections with all of your experience with Titanic, why don't you tell our viewers about that? Because I know that's such a area of intrigue. What was that like when you made that discovery, and what type of knowledge now are you bringing forward to Nauticos that has the same type of value?
Well, I actually started with the Titanic project back in 1979 when we had somebody, Michael Harris, who was a producer at the time of documentaries, come to us and ask if we could put together a system to go find Titanic. And we were one of the few companies in the world that was operating in those depths, bringing back video imagery, that sort of thing. And so he came to us. That project fell through. At the same time, Bob Ballard came to us and said, well, how about you do it for me? And so we started planning the whole expedition for Ballard in 1979. And Dr. Ballard was unable to get funding to follow through it at that point. And so in 1984, I was out in California working and got a call from Dr. Ballard saying, how would you like another shot at Titanic? So, who would say no to that? That was pretty exciting. So he was building equipment, had gotten funding from the Navy, and wanted to bring in the same sort of technology that we had used back in 1979. So it was a very similar system, and being built for government projects, but the government was nice enough, the Navy, to give us time on one of their projects to go out and look for Titanic using this equipment. The difficulty was we weren't a real good search system. We were more focused on the imagery itself and not the sonar or those sorts of things for search. So it was a bit frustrating because there had been another sonar system out there that was supposed to find it, and we were just going to document it. And we had a hard decision to make. We didn't have much time. So we said, are we going to look for it or just give it up and come back another time? We decided to go for it. We only had 4 days left when we found it. So it was getting very frustrating. We were getting worried we were going to fail. And all of a sudden we found it, which was an incredibly exciting moment, followed by kind of a solemn moment when we started seeing reminders that there was a lot of human loss on this wreck. And, we started thinking about that side of it. And from that point on, it became business. We had a job to do. We had to document as much as we could in 4 days. And we just started clicking through the data and collection. Then when we got home, we hadn't made much of a deal about this, and we came back to the little tiny town of Woods Hole, and there was satellite trucks lining the road, and people just jammed onto the pier, and we suddenly realized how important the find was that we had made, and how excited the public was about it. And that was kind of good. My parents were on the pier waiting with my 2 boys and my wife, and I hadn't expected that, so that was pretty exciting. So yeah, it was neat. And then going back and exploring it several times after that is it's always exciting. You learn something new. It's such a big ship, such a huge wreck out there, that you always see something different every time you go back. And unfortunately, I was involved a little over a year ago now when the loss of the Titan occurred, because PH Nargile was lost on that. He was a good friend, and we had worked together over the years in trying to figure out what the next thing we should look at on the Titanic was. And we always talked to each other about his projects out there, and he had participated in one of my projects that I did with Nauticos, where Discovery Channel hired us to go back and explore and do a live broadcast from Titanic. So it's played a major role in my career.
Wow. Yeah, when I think about the cool factor, and I'm coming to these meetings, you guys are all so humble on the Nauticos team, and I'm the newbie. I'm going, you did what? Like, this is cool stuff here. So as the person who gets to sort of extract these stories out of you guys, I appreciate you sharing your expertise and really teaching our audience about it from this beginner level. When you explain stuff, I really want people to come in assuming that they don't know much, because it is your world, but to the rest of us, it's pretty darn mysterious. I wanted to pull up a couple of photos here and kind of give our audience context of the part of the world that we are going to go to. So let's see. So this is a photo of Howland Island that I took from the Pilatus PC-12NG when I flew around the world in 2014. And with that whole story, connection to my name, and being named after Amelia Earhart because of the role that she played and her legacy that she left behind, this was a super special moment to be flying over this island. And this is where we gave out scholarships to girls 16 to 18 years old all across the US that would learn to fly in this moment. So seeing this island, for me, thinking about going back with the Nauticos team and being a part of the search and the possible recovery of the Lockheed Electro with this new information, it's got my brain thinking on this whole new level of what's possible for science and what's possible for myself and how I can stretch myself around this project. I'm curious to hear how you both have grown through the years of, going out to sea like this. Is this an extreme environment to you, or is this just like any other day?
All right.
Well,
It's
you can't forget it's an extreme environment, or otherwise it'll bite you really badly. So that's always up front in our thinking when we're planning a mission. We're picking and choosing the best times of the year to be out there. We're designing the equipment to withstand the really harsh environment, and we still suffer through failures. It's a hard environment to work in, but you can never forget it, or people can actually be lost. So
Yeah.
It's always in the forefront.
Yeah, I know safety is a big part of the whole operation out there. Jeff, when you look at this picture here, tell our audience what we're looking at. This is critical to the search for Amelia.
So what you're looking at here, this is a Remus 6000 AUV developed by Woods Hole Oceanographic Institute. And this particular vehicle is operated by Woods Hole. It's actually owned by Ray Dalio's foundation. This was originally part of a 2-vehicle set that I was instrumental in. I actually spec'd these vehicles, the design or I spec'd these for Ted Waite when he originally purchased them. That is an autonomous underwater vehicle. So what that is we program it. It is not tethered to the ship. It is basically a drone that we program, we launch, and then it descends to the bottom. It has a very sophisticated navigation system that consists of an inertial navigation system and a Doppler velocity log. And this particular vehicle has a series of deep ocean transponders. And that allows it to navigate on the seafloor. You got to remember, we're working in 18,000 feet of water here. It's deep down. And then on the sides of this vehicle are side scan sonars that look out either side. In the case with this vehicle, we are looking out 700 meters either side and detecting targets down to about 1 meter cubic meter inside. We're obviously we're looking for her airplane, which is roughly 15 meters by 10 meters in size. So that gives you
Yeah.
an idea of what we can detect. So this is a very critical piece of equipment. This is the search tool. This particular vehicle has a bottom time of about 22 hours before it has to come up. And then we bring it back on deck. We change the batteries. We download the data. We put in a new survey plan and off it goes again. In the future, in the next iteration of this, we'll be using multiple of these type of vehicles, in order to cover ground as quickly and as efficiently as possible out there.
Oh, I love that we have some dogs. Are those yours, Tom? Dogs are welcome. So, Jeff, we're having a little trouble. At least I am having a little trouble hearing your mic. Could you scooch a little closer or make any adjustments? It's sounding a little blurry. Is that same for you too, Tom?
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I really want to make sure everyone's getting all these details, because the next topic we're going to discuss is really critical to why this is such a different search for Amelia. And it's going to look like a lot of info, but Jeff, I think you're probably the one who could walk us through this timeline, but I want you to, with our time in mind, keep it brief, because we're going to talk about the radio signal analysis.
Okay.
Take us through some key moments and why it all matters so much.
So as I said, the project started in 1995. And in that time, from 1995 to 2002, we did a lot of historic research and a lot of analysis on the systems. That allowed us to define a primary search area, which at this point we've covered. But that allowed us in 2002 to execute the first search of that. And then we were out there. We followed that up again. The 2002 search found some targets, but nothing magic, not her. And it also ended with a mechanical failure. 2006, we conducted another search, covered another approximately 600 square nautical miles. That got us up to about 1,200 out of our defined area of about 2,000. In 2017, we completed that 2,000 square nautical mile area, and that was based on all that original data. And that analysis of the system before getting our hands on the actual radio equipment itself. Mind you, during this whole time, we had been slowly collecting all of that historic radio equipment. It had started with Elgin. He had gotten his hands on an RA1, the Bendix RA1 receiver that she had in the aircraft. It also had one of the Bendix loop antennas. 2018, we come back in 2017, we've completed our primary search box, roughly 2,000 square nautical miles. Still don't have an aircraft. We've had multiple targets at this point in time. All of them have turned about to be shipping debris, trash, et cetera, on the seafloor. In March of 2018, one of our radio guys was at a ham radio swap meet, and he happens to walk into a room, and there sitting on a table is a copy of the Western Electric 13C transmitter, which is the key component we needed to figure out how far she was from the island when she made different radio calls. He inquires, and he's able to secure it, purchase it. That allowed us to rebuild the systems, to restore them, we had a technical review in 2019 going over where do we go next, and that's where the genesis of the testing generated, as well as a bunch of other research avenues. What are we missing, as Tom has said very eloquently at times. All that ended up with us in 2020. During COVID, we had the radio systems up and operating. They were all in spec of 1937 specifications, fully restored, fully operational. We started meeting with various companies to look for a test platform that we could mount these on and conduct a series of tests. In March of 2020, we teamed up. We met with Dynamic Aviation, which is a company down in Bridgewater, Virginia. And they had the kind of aircraft, and they had a Beech 18, which is very similar to Amelia's aircraft. that we could use for the test. So that allowed us to move forward. In 2020, in October, we conducted the tests. And then from then, we started analyzing all of the data. And that leads us to where we are now with having defined search areas based on that proprietary information that we generated during those tests.
I just have to say, well done on this hard work. This is not a small deal. People like just go, oh, cool. I'm like, this is so much hard work. I just have to point that out. As an around the world pilot, the kinds of details that go into doing things far from home with big pieces of equipment and machinery and the FAA involved, anything like that is so difficult. So thank you for doing all the hard work. I'm joining at the easy point where I just get to come in and tell the story. So I just want to point that out for our audience. This is no small deal. Real quick, we're getting lots of comments coming in, and one of them is from Bill Mills, a member of our team. Also, thank you to Ryan and Mark who left comments as well. But Bill says, I met Tom when we returned to film the Japanese submarine I-52 for a National Geographic special in 1998. It was the Nauticos team that actually located the submarine at 18,000 feet. Since then, they have successfully located several important ships, including the Israeli submarine Dakar. As a documentary filmmaker, I have concluded that Nauticos is the only group that has the scientific data and navigational information capable of locating the missing Lockheed Electra. Now, this is a slanted viewpoint because Bill is on our team. We have to be transparent, but it's true. Everyone is a volunteer on this team, and we're all doing this because everyone is real supportive of each other's, what they're bringing to the table. So I'm going to put the map back up here. Tom, I want to ask you, when you think back to your experience with Titanic and you look at this coverage area and now think about our next search area, how do you feel about our probability of locating the plane? That's what everyone wants to know.
Well, one thing that we always point out is when we don't find it in an area, it's not a waste of time because we've identified where it's not. And that's area we don't have to search again. Although I have to say that when getting ready for the 2017 mission, Jeff and I went over every inch of data that had been collected previously just to make sure we hadn't missed it before and before planning out the new areas we would go to. Mm-hmm. So, all of this is good data, and we know it's not there. And in some of the area that we've identified where she possibly could be based on the new data, there's some overlap, and some of the areas already been covered. So, make some smart decisions as to where we start our search in this next go around, because we know some of it's been covered. And so I think that's really increased our probability of finding her on this mission in a reasonable amount of time.
Let's talk about that time frame. Tell our audience what it'll look like when we go out on this search. Once we get our funding and everything's lined up with the ship, how long will we be out there?
Well, we're at this point. The way we're planning this, because as we've talked about, the technology has moved significantly ahead. And in today's world, what we want to do is make the next search very efficient. To do that means we're going to operate multiple AUVs simultaneously on the seafloor. Right now, we're planning for roughly a 28-day on-station mission. That would allow us to get to somewhere around 70% of our total search map. The assets that we are looking at and evaluating as capable of doing what we need to do have the ability to stay on station up to about 40 some days. So that would allow us to get to the 95th percentile of our area of uncertainty at this point in time. That would leave some very distinct, very minor outliers where there's probably always going to be something that we don't understand about what happened. But that really gets into the far extremes of what could have happened. The radio data that we have now so distinctly binds how far she could be. It's just not possible for her to be anywhere else unless something really uncalculated or unanticipated happened. And we've done a bunch of testing on some of that too. The one that comes up a lot of times is people ask about, well, what if the plane floated? We've looked at that quite extensively, and the chance of that happening are literally in the fractions of 1% to create a scenario where that could occur. So without something like that happening, that means the aircraft has to be within the proximity of where last.
Yeah.
We have that pretty well defined. So the technology allowed us to get there in this time to literally take this to the end of the limits of our research.
Mm-hmm. I'm going to bring the picture of Howland Island back up again, because I was thinking about this last night when we were kind of contemplating, how the audience can connect to our story. And my role as a part of the Nauticos team is to help tell the story, help with social media and all of that. But I'm also an around the world pilot. And when I did this flight, and I'm not trying to brag, I want to point this out in a way that really aligns with what Elgin Long and his perspective was as an around the world pilot, that when you're leaving Papua New Guinea and you're trying to find Howland Island, you have a real strategic plan of what to do if you don't locate it when you intend to. And as pilots, we have really rigid structures and systems and procedures. That's how we stay safe up there. And we do our best to follow those. Now, in Amelia's case, in Fred's case, that obviously didn't work out. But that's why it's really easy for me to understand the Nauticos theory. Because when you're flying, and if Amelia was at about 1,000 feet, and she's looking for this piece of land, which the top elevation is a couple feet over the water. It is nothing. You're not going to see anything in the distance, any sort of horizon. And the cloud shadows that would be forming too at 8 o'clock in the morning when Amelia was looking for Howland, they could cast shadows that would look almost identical to the shape of that island. So for our audience members who haven't been out to this part of the world, there are very few people that have, because there's nothing out there once you go. It's like a different, it's not like flying into Dallas or Houston, right? It's a very different way, especially when Amelia was navigating. So all that to say, as a pilot, if I was out there searching, running out of fuel would be the option to stay on course, because you want to have the highest chance of those coming to your rescue. So can you talk to us, Jeff, about what that response was like when Amelia disappeared? Like, what happened on the Itasca when they couldn't locate the plane?
Okay, so at 7:42, she declares, she gets on the radio and she calls the Itasca and says, "I must be on you, but cannot see you. I'm at 1,000 feet." What that tells all of us, the people in the radio room, etc., that she had just reached where she thought the island was, and she had begun searching for it. At 1,000 feet, there's a lot of reasons she could be there. The most obvious one, in particular, if you've ever been out to that area, there are constant cumulus clouds, low altitude cumulus clouds out there. That would be the main reason for doing that, would be to get below the cloud level. At that point, she was a signal strength 5 out of 5 in the radio room of the Itasca. And there's 2 recordings of that transmission. You got to remember, we don't have an audio recording of it. What we have is transcripts, and there were multiple versions of those transcripts. There were 3 different transcripts in that room, kept by 2 different radio operators and a journalist who was in the room. 2 of those record what she said as half-hour fuel remaining at 7:42. The other one records fuel running low. So semantics of which it was, either one, she thinks she's very close to running out of fuel. We don't hear from her for 18 minutes or 16 minutes. At 7:58, she comes back on, and she asks the Coast Guard cutter to transmit the letter A on 7,500 kilohertz. And the reason for doing that is she's going to attempt to take a bearing. She had been asking for the Coast Guard to take a bearing on her and relay that to her, and nothing had come through. And there's a long story as to why there were no two-way voice comms with it. 7:58, she asks the Coast Guard to transmit the letter A. She comes back on 2 minutes later and said, "I received your signals, but I was unable to get a minimum." That is the only time that we know where we have an acknowledgement of one side transmitting and the other one, in Amelia knowing, responding that she heard them.
Mm-hmm.
Why that's so important is 7500 was completely out of band for her GF system, but she heard it. And the fact that she did that tells us a lot about what kind of range that she could have been in the Coast Guard cutter assessment.
Mm-hmm.
At 8 o'clock too, and you and I have talked about this, Amelia. If you put yourself in Amelia's seat in the aircraft, she thinks at that moment in time she has 12 minutes of fuel remaining. That's what she told them at 7:42.
Mm-hmm.
What is she going to do at that moment in time? She just heard the signal. She knows she's nearby. She's going to continue her search. We don't hear anything from her from 43 minutes, which puts her half hour over what she thinks she has. She comes back on at 8:43 and transmits. I'm on line of position 157337, heading north and south. Stop, wait. I will repeat this on 6210. And she never comes back up. It's pretty obvious at that point in time that she was very close. Now, one of the things that is in all the historic records at that 8 o'clock time, Leo Bellart's chief radioman on Coast Guard, she's recorded at a signal strength 5+. He literally, in interviews after the fact, stated, she came in so loud and clear, I was expecting her to fly directly overhead any second. He actually left the radio room at that moment in time to run out on deck because he was convinced that they should be hearing the aircraft. So, all the evidence points, it's all right there.
Yeah.
They were convinced then. And, we know how far away she has to be to hit radio signal strength 5 at this point in time because we've tested it. We've actually run those radios, those transmitters, and recorded it. It's close. It's very close. It's just, as Dave Jordan, the president of the company, says, it's heartbreaking.
Yeah. Yeah, he uses that phrase, heartbreakingly close to the island. Thank you for explaining all that. I want to shift gears a little bit and talk about, especially since we're airing this on LinkedIn, I want to talk about the professional aspect of this, right? You all are professional adventurers and, explorers in a way that's highly unusual. But there are some same skills that we can apply, I think, in the world of business and how we operate through an adventurous mindset. How do you, I don't know, how does that work for you? Because I know I'm an adventurous person. I try all sorts of things before giving up on projects. I'll try a lot and actually get hurt along the way, right? It's learn to love the turbulence. But I'm curious about your perspectives, Tom.
Well, airplanes still continue to go down. And a lot of times, in the case of the Titan, we had to get out there quickly and look because there was some theory that maybe the submersible had made it almost to the surface and was floating either on the surface or just below the surface. So there was the saving of lives involved. So we get quite clever in those circumstances because we want to solve it as quickly as possible. Titanic's another example. We didn't have enough time to actually conduct a proper search for Titanic. So we came up with a theory that, well, it's going to break up. There's going to be a very large debris field. And we figured out what the spacing of the debris could roughly be. So we spaced our track lines out much, much farther, about a mile between track lines, so we could cover much more ground, thinking that we would encounter a piece of wreckage, and then we could zero in on where the wreck was once we saw that piece of wreckage. So we're constantly having to get clever depending on the circumstances of what it is we're trying to do. If we need to find something quickly, sometimes we take shortcuts. If we need to absolutely find something and we know there's no reason to hurry, then we'll conduct a very thorough search. We'll have lots of overlap and make sure that we don't miss the target. So we're always thinking on our feet out there, that's for sure.
Yeah, I use that analogy in my keynote speeches quite often as pilots and people in worlds where we have to stick within parameters. It's pushing the envelope, right? The envelope of the parameters in which everything we use can operate within is really strict. Most people stay right in the middle. Sometimes you got to push a little closer to the edge, right? That's what Amelia's flight around the world was. That's what mine was. That's what all of your searches were, successful and otherwise. So I think that commonality of pushing the boundary is something that when I see that in someone in business, I'm usually like, yeah, let's go, right? It's kind of contagious.
The one thing that changes that, though, the one thing that changes that is if you're doing it just on your own, you might be willing to take more risks. You know, they're managed risks. You know what you're doing.
Yeah.
But when you've got a crew of people that you have to watch out for as well, then you might not take as many of those risks. You'll play a little more safely.
Yeah, I think of the whole project as a big risk in a way because, you know, we don't know the outcome. And that's something that people have asked a few questions about. They say, well, how will you handle it if you go out there and you don't find her? And I know I haven't had that experience yet, but at least logically, the point is to keep searching, right? Honing it in. And Jeff, you talk about that a lot. We're honing down this search area. And as we do that, there's only so much logical space to cover. So how does that incorporate in with your ideas around like an adventurous mindset and how you go about your business? Because you do a lot of different things.
To me, I do quite a bit, quite a few different things. And the reality is what we're doing here is we're pushing the boundaries. But in doing that, the first thing you got to understand is we have built an amazing team. The answer has always been, if we're not an expert on it, let's go find the expert and bring them into the team. We all have our different skill sets and they all fit together. In addition to that, it's very expensive to go out on the ocean doing this. We have very limited time when we're at it. We have to use it very efficiently. So we do our homework over and over and over again. And then we have 10 different people peer review everything that we've thought about. We bring in people who don't have a clue about the background of what we've done before, but they're experts in something, and we get that peer review and add that into the mix and look at it. Mm-hmm. That's how you accomplish very difficult things. This is literally the Mount Everest of the underwater world. The way it's going to get solved is by doing it in the same methodical fashion that astronauts went to the moon. Except we have to build on known, proven fact. We have to validate everything we do. We need to get different viewpoints on everything we do, bring in the experts as we have. But that allows us to pursue that adventurous thing. It's like jumping out of a perfectly good airplane. It seems like it's a very dangerous thing. The reality is a very, very carefully orchestrated activity that is unbelievably safe when you actually look up the industry. And it's because it's calculated, it's thought out.
Yeah.
You've accounted for those uncertainties that you don't know. And we have to do that just when we leave the dock. I mean, the Howland Island area is 1,600 nautical miles from Honolulu. It is 600 nautical miles from Tarawa. The closest runway to us that we could land an aircraft. We have to think about the fact that if we hurt somebody out there, it's going to be days before we can get them to true medical treatment. So there's a lot. It's well orchestrated. It's thought out. It's calculated. But that's how you accomplish big things in life, is by doing the math, as we said, doing the math.
Yeah, I find that the most adventurous people in my life that stick around the longest and I respect the most are the ones that are the most precise, right? My dad's that way. He is, when he goes on his trips and goes mountaineering and all this stuff, everything is to a T. And that's, I think, where I got that from is incorporating that into flying is what made me feel so confident about going around the world, right? 80% of the flight around the world was over water, 80% of 28,000 miles. So you have to be trusting your engine. You have to be trusting that your head isn't going to take you places and distract you from the task at hand. There was a lot of emotion on that trip. So when I think back to really how all of our attitudes really align well, but Amelia had that same kind of attitude too. I got to show you guys. I have some props here. This is so heavy. This is a bronze Amelia, and this is the same one that's in the Capitol. And this was made by the Lundin family here in Colorado. I don't know. Have you guys ever seen this?
I haven't.
Same one that's in the front of the Amelia Museum in Atchison. But I look at this woman every day. You know, she's all over my life, having the same name. It's as we were chatting about last night in our team meeting. I get jokes about it. You know, haha. Like there's so many Amelia things, and trust me, you can throw them my way. I've heard them all. Mostly, don't be too mean to say that on the internet. That's a very dangerous thing. But my favorite one to share, and this is for Bill because he wants me to start sharing more of these, is I was going to one of my keynote events and I got to the airport, and I had a driver. I was lucky enough to have this man picking me up from the airport, and he had a little board and it said Amelia Earhart on it. And as I got up to him, he goes, "You have no idea how many people walked up to me and said, dude, she is never showing up." Right. So like, there's just so many jokes. The name is fake. I want to get your take on the coincidence of having someone named Amelia Earhart joining your team. Was that like weird to wrap your head around? Because it is for me. It's so unique. We're the only people on the planet that could pull this off.
Go ahead. I mean, I'll say no, it's not. It's because, hands down, Dave had wanted to get you involved many years ago in our team. And as we were trying, we have never told our story of what we've been doing. Yeah. And we were trying to wrap our head around how we were going to do that, because now that we have something important to say, which is that we know where she was at 8:00 and we can prove it mathematically. We knew that it was time that we needed to tell her story. We spent 1.5 years trying to look at how are we going to do this? What is the right format? And we've shot a lot of video over the years. We have quite an archive of all of these expeditions, these meetings, all that kind of stuff. How do we do it? Is it to, create a series or something like that, put it on TV? And that wasn't it. And the fact that it was in January when we were talking with Rod, and we were lining up to do some work or help out with some presentations at the Adventurous Museum. And Rod, one of our radio guys, said that, hey, we need to get Amelia, because he had met you in Atchison.
At the Earhart Festival.
Right. And she's like, she would be great. And that kicked off in Dave's head, I really wanted to get her involved in the project. And it's two important things to that is, yes, you have name recognition there, but what did that name do for you? It caused you to get very interested in the subject, to become a pilot and recreate her round the world flight. So it's weird, but at the same time, it's what inspired you to do that. And you have the same dedication to this that we do. You're pursuing it in the same ways, at the same levels of precision that we are. And then with your background in social media, in public speaking and all that, we needed a voice. I mean, we're a bunch of engineers and analysts and things like that. We are not the best public speakers.
You guys are doing great. You guys are catching up quick. And well, while we're chatting about that, I will put a plug out to our audience. So we're trying to grow our social media, because here's the goal is gain a big following, get everyone interested in the Nauticos story, understanding the data, why we want to go back out. And if we grow enough of a big following, we'll grab the attention of some big brands. Brands would have huge exposure. Let's say we put a sticker of a certain, I don't know, any kind of company, I won't say it, I don't want to jinx anything, on the AUVs that are going to be searching. That camera and everything's going to be visible to our live stream. So there's a lot of possibility here. So as we start working towards those opportunities, there's a fun analogy, and I know Jeff's going to roll his eyes about this one, but I love a metaphor. And because this is sonar, I don't know if you've heard this one yet, Tom, but every time someone on social media gives us a like or a follow, it is like a ping letting us know that we are on target. Okay. Yep. Because the more you support us, the more, we're not asking you for funding or money or anything like that. This is more on the corporate level. It's going to be many millions of dollars. Jeff, tell us about the budget real quick, high level. So, just kind of, I know people are curious.
To execute this search in today's world with the level of technology we need in order to to accomplish the survey, as we're talking about roughly $10 million to get out there and do it correctly, and to bring the correct equipment to bear. Now we can get out there for a lot less, but we would only be able to accomplish a fraction of the area we want to survey. And the goal here is to go out there and to cover the extent of the uncertainty we have now. So, it's cheaper in the long run, and but it's expensive. There's, putting a ship to sea is expensive. There's no two ways around it.
I love it. We got some turbulence under the desk there. The dogs. I love it.
My wife just dropped her little puppy off, and the puppy drives the bigger dogs nuts.
And that puppy over here. I love it.
Amelia, I've got to throw this out. I do a lot of shipwreck, and a lot of times people make the comment that you're disturbing a gravesite. And I always make a point to say, we're not disturbing a gravesite. This is an accident site. And once you've discovered an accident site, it now makes you obligated to tell the story, to finish that story. It's an unfinished story. You've got to pick it up, figure out what happened, and tell the story. And so that's what you bring to this. You're helping us tell this story, which is something we all were lacking. And that's going to be as important as any other part of this mission is getting that story out. If you think about what Amelia accomplished at the time period that she accomplished it, when it was difficult for women to make, a big role in the world for themselves, she must have been an incredible person. And that's the story we got to get out there.
Thank you for saying that, Tom. I really appreciate that, because I do bring a little bit more of the heart of, the emotion behind this. I've grown up with this name. I have thought about Amelia. I'm probably the only person in the world who maybe has thought about her more than you guys, because when I hear her name, I hear two identities. I hear myself, I hear her legacy. And so living up to that has been really important. And I love that the Nauticos team is so professional and so astute, and it's not a joke. It's like, there's so much reverence for her and her legacy. I want to bring that into our story to a new generation that maybe doesn't understand her in the same way, right? If the kid today is on TikTok versus a picture of a black and white photo, their brain's going towards the colors. So I want to humanize her a little bit. I think she and I have a lot in common. She was 39 years old when she disappeared. She had so much of her life left to live. She had just gotten married. She was doing all these different things, all these different sponsorships, clothing, luggage. This was a multifaceted woman who today, I believe, would have been one of the world's most important influencers, celebrity icon wise, but not in a tabloid kind of way. Like, I feel like she had a character to her that set her apart in how she carried herself, right? How she'd hide her little smile with her gap teeth. I'm truly fascinated by this woman. And I think bringing that into the story is what's going to get people on board, because I don't think it would be disrupting a grave site. Amelia and Fred, nobody intended for the flight to end that way.
That's right.
That being said, their intention was to come back home and complete the circle, right? I wouldn't have finished my flight around the world if I had to go right back to Oakland. And that's what we're doing. We want to bring her back. And I asked myself, would Amelia be a part of this search for another missing aviatrix? Yes, I think she would. I can't make that assumption for sure, but she had that attitude towards life. And I think that's the best way I can represent her, not being related to her, of course, in any way by blood, but relating to this woman who I want to be like today. And it runs really deep. So I think it's a really cool balance with all of us. Can we take a couple questions before we wrap things up? We've already been chatting for about 50 minutes.
Sure.
So a couple of comments are coming through. Please put your questions in the comments. I can read them here through StreamYard. But also a couple of silly ones have been coming in my reading of the social media comments. And I roll my eyes every single time. So Jeff, set us straight. Why does everybody think Amelia is in the Bermuda Triangle? I don't even like it coming out of my mouth. Can you just say it out loud once and for all that is not a thing?
So her last radio signal message was recorded signal strength 5. And the last 3 were signal strength 5 or better. from 7:42 to 8:43. There is no way that signal can get anywhere further than about 100 nautical miles from the Coast Guard cutter at that time of day. Our radio guys will tell you flat out, you cannot create these bounce skyways that people talk about, that she's somewhere else on the planet Earth. It can't happen at that time of day. It has to happen at certain atmospheric conditions, and that wasn't them. So it's not possible. The other addition to that is she only had so much fuel. The one of the major pieces that Elgin brought to the table and beyond his historic research is getting the first fuel endurance study was done by the Skunk Works guy, Kelly Johnson. He had taught Amelia how to adjust her fuel analyzers or her fuel mixture system on aircraft. He was the first one after she disappeared to take a look at the scenario, at the wind, at the altitude she had recording the different pieces, the environmentals, and what was actually loaded in the aircraft. And he came then that she likely disappeared at that moment in time, about the time. And then extensive other PhD level analyses have been done of that. She ran out of fuel. It's very simple. When she said, I'm running out of fuel, she was. And one last thing I'll say with that, and I've told you this many times, one of the things that is in Elgin's book, which is over my head here, is one of the key things he brings up in that look at it is that when Amelia says something, we believe her. She was recording all this. All this is being recorded in real time. There is no reason to fudge things, say things that weren't true, except these were recorded in the moment.
Yeah.
When she says I'm running low on fuel, she's running low on fuel. When she says I must be on you, but can you see you? That's what she thinks at that moment in time.
Yeah, there's no
she's
reason.
Not telling the story. Right.
And in that mindset, she is in fight or flight in that moment, thinking about psychologically, physiologically, everything they're going through. They are down to bare minimums and just getting the information across, with that level.
The one other thing I want to add to that is in Leo Bellard's interviews, he talks about that very distinctly. From 7:42 on, each radio transmission, he could hear the tension in her voice climbing and climbing and climbing. And he actually says at 8:43, he literally thought she was panicking at that moment in time, that she was almost in tears. And he said that she was distraught. She knew that she was up against the wall and there wasn't much left. And that doesn't happen. It's sad, but that's
it shows her bravery.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, changing the subject here just a bit. I want to show I have a tiny little shrunken cup. Teeny tiny from 2002. I don't want to date you guys, but I was 1 year out of high school when this cup was shrunken, and someone in my family circle of friends clipped out a newspaper article and sent me something about a shrunken cup with Nauticos. So that's when I first heard about you guys, and now I have one here in my living room. Dave Jordan sent it in a little jar. So tell us the quick story behind this. Tom, why don't you take this one? And also, what does this mean for what the plane could be like 18,000 feet underwater? We have to have like 10 more of these conversations because we have a lot more to go over, but give us the high level of what happens pressure-wise at those depths down in the abyss. I was studying earlier, right? Is it the abyss?
Well, styrofoam is manufactured by blowing air into plastic. So there's lots of air bubbles in a styrofoam cup. And as it goes down, we'll put on, a laundry bag or something like that full of cups. They're full size. People often draw things on them because as it shrinks down, the proportions will all stay the same. They'll just get smaller. But as it goes down, the air gets squashed out of the styrofoam, and so the cup just shrinks down, maintaining its look as a cup, but getting much smaller. We used to do the styrofoam weight heads and things like that as well. In the case of the airplane, though, there would have been water intrusion relatively quickly, and the water would equalize the pressure inside and outside, so the plane won't actually squash. And less there could be some sort of entrained air in it. But it should remain pretty much intact and looking just like an airplane and the same size that it was when it went down.
Wow. Let me put the photo up of the plane here. Oops, wrong one. That's really interesting to think about. You know, and what a beautiful aircraft too. Can I just say, what a beautiful design. Have you guys both seen the one that's located in Atchison at the Amelia Earhart Hangar Museum?
I haven't gotten to it yet.
You haven't been there.
It's a beautiful design, but it must have been very fatiguing to fly. It would be noisy, smelly, vibrate a lot. It must have been, because the engines are sitting literally right outside of her cockpit. And I think it would be very fatiguing to fly that for the number of hours she did.
Yeah, the Pilatus was like a dream compared to, obviously compared to this, but you know, people give me such a hard time. They go, oh, well, you flew around the world, but you didn't do it in a Lockheed Electra. And I say, tell me about your last flight around the world, my friend. We want to use the latest and greatest technology. Okay, I want to show, this is so cool, some of our comments that are coming through here. I love this program. Look at this. Gennaro Ryan, excited to watch the hard work and effort put in over the years unfold. It'll be pretty amazing. Mike Holley, great webcast. So you're saying there's hope to solve this mystery. Absolutely. We are ready to go back and test the data. And the search area is about the size of Rhode Island. And you can drive across Rhode Island in about an hour. Think about that. Oh, I got to put this one up. Mark, thank you so much. I agree. Amelia Rose is a legend in her own right, especially here in Denver. Oh, thanks, Mark. No, that's one thing. Nauticos has made me feel totally validated and 100% part of the team. In fact, in like the woo-woo side of my brain, when I think, you know, what's it all meant to be? Why is this all happening? I really think this has been a long time in the works with like the real purpose behind the flight was to lead me to Nauticos because there's been such an ease and a comfort of how the team has been working together. I don't know if you guys are always like this, but it's just like chill. Everyone does their work. It's very, you know, it's a space where we can all make improvements and make suggestions. So I love it when a team functions really well because, you know, it's fun for brains like ours. So let's see, question here. What probability theory are you using for your ISPM? Who's going to take this one?
By ISPM.
If you can give us some more clarification on your question, we will bring it back up here. Mark says he loves the cup. Let's see. All right, and then everyone was chatting about Howland Island and the elevation of the altitude there, just to, you know, about 10 feet at the most, right? That's what Amelia was looking for. The I'll take this comment down. I don't want to be too indulgent. We'll put it back on the cup. So let's see here. As we wrap up, I think what's a closing thought you want to leave our audience with? You know, we are really putting ourselves out there, being super transparent about what's next, how we start fundraising. Tom, what do you want people to take as a next action to help us get back out to find the plane?
Well, it's certainly a great legacy project. I mean, wouldn't you want to be known as somebody who helped bring this to fruition and brought Amelia back to life and you know, solved the mystery once and for all? There's not a whole lot of mysteries left on this planet anymore, and this is one of the great ones. So it'd be super to be a part of it.
Yeah. It does feel special in that way. Very rare and unique, and deserves a lot of reverence, I think. Jeff, what about you?
I think the big thing is, you know, we need to get the story out. We have literally sat on the story throughout all of our years and all the research we've done. And the reason for that is that we felt that, we were working off a theory for a long, long time. And but we didn't want to spin the world up that, hey, we understand this better than anybody else without having something to back it up. At this point, we have that. We have done something in the radio testing and the with those radios and restoring them and then testing them. and all the work we've done, that now we can truly say we know where she was at 8 a.m. Within a area of uncertainty. It's not, it's not a pinpoint. It's a radius from the island at a specific time, and it's a donut, so to speak, of around the island. And now we need to tell that story, and we need to debunk a lot of things that have been said, that have been put out there. I mean, the one you brought up about the Bahamas, being in the Bermuda Triangle. Well, there is, and people need to understand, there is a way to skip bounce radio signals around the world. But you can only do that at very specific times of day. And the ionosphere has to be in a certain condition. And I'm not an expert in it, but I have guys who are. And at 8 a.m., I think, Rod or Tom, one of our radio engineers the other day, somebody was asking about that. At that time, when she made those transmissions, it was not possible to know she left. So we need to get the story out there. We need to set the record straight. And that's very important for Amelia's legacy, too.
Yeah.
This really isn't a mystery. Elgin said it best. This really isn't a mystery. It's an air accident investigation. And we need to bring this to closure. And it's an air accident investigation of somebody who is pushing the boundaries of technology absolutely to the limit at that moment. And she came up just a little bit short. She's not a bad pilot. She was literally taking us to the next level. And when people do that, push the boundaries, sometimes they come up a little bit short. We need to honor that. What her overall message was is really important for the future of us as humans.
Yeah. I agree with all that. Okay, we got one more bit of information here. Improved search planning method. And the original question was, what probability theory are you using for your ISPM?
There's a whole bunch of things that are going into that. We have a team of people who are bouncing a whole series of different methodologies off of. So everybody understands. If we know where she was at 8 o'clock in an area, that anchors the last 43 minutes of the flight. The reality is there are many different paths she could take to get from where she was at 8 o'clock to the final radio message at 43 minutes later. We're accounting for every possible path that could be flown. Wow. And there's a set of models that are being used, and they're being the debates that go on about which one is the higher probability little square in a much bigger area. It's an interesting thing.
Yeah, I know Rod, who's one of our engineer experts, Rod Bloxham and Tom Vinson. Rod's answering some questions in the comments and getting back. So that's the fun part about this is the beginning of our conversation. I've said the whole time as I've joined the Nauticos team, I'm coming on board with a very open mind saying, teach me everything because I don't, the ocean is so different than the sky, but there are a lot of similarities in a lot of ways. So as I bring folks along, I'm going to be real transparent about the questions and even ask the silly ones because I think that's how we get the biggest audience. Because one thing that I want my final thought to be is one thing that makes our story really unique and I think attractive to, say, a big company that wants to put some serious cash into this because of the visibility they would get while going out on our search and representing themes like adventure and exploration and being bold and all these things that are such positive qualities, in the types of leaders that we want to raise, is thinking about this is the opportunity to be a part of a historic event that is not a flash in the pan. It's not a sporting event that's going to get repeated. This is a once in a lifetime thing that moment of exploration, Jeff, that you've talked about so much, would you say is like hours of boredom and then excitement, right? And then nothing, or maybe some different emotions, Tom, like you said afterwards. But this is a chance to really latch on to something different and unique that could set you apart from competitors, I think, because it is going to be a worldwide story that everyone from a 5-year-old can talk to a grandparent and everyone in between. So I'll end with that.
You want us to are you looking for each of us to?
No, not at all. I was just saying I'm just excited because it's got so much potential, and that's what I wanted to end with. If anyone wants to reach out, you can, it's easy to get a hold of us through our Nauticos emails. I'm Amelia at nauticos.com. Tom and Jeff at theirs as well. So check out our website. We've got lots of videos from different searches, and I think I'll wrap up our conversation here, but thank you both so much for your time, and I'm excited to keep sharing all this with our audience as it grows. So thank you both.
Thank you.
Thank you, Amelia.
Blue skies.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.